Self-observation. How do we touch life? It becomes necessary to realize that each of us touches life in our own special way. Suppose, for example, that we have an old-fashioned, conservative attitude, then we touch so-called modern life, partly through this predisposition and therefore judge as if we knew better. Each one of us touches life according to implanted attitudes and stances picked up and acquired through tens of thousands of influences, interactions, peers, siblings, family, friends, colleagues and neighbors. You could be challenged as to why you might dislike a certain person, and obviously feel awkward about answering this truthfully. Can we really know why we dislike a particular person? Later on, after learning more about them, we may suddenly like the individual, once we begin to walk a mile in their shoes. One of the most interesting things with self-observation is to begin to realize that we are always touching life in a certain ingrained way, mostly through attitudes and buffers. It is quite extraordinary to become even a little freer from this acquired way of taking things and of taking others. Everyone, tightly wrapped up in their own acquired personality, takes things just as they do every day of their lives. With insight into oneself, it is, however, possible to take things in a new way. This is one of the ideas of this work. Must we always take things and people in the same way? Is it possible to change? What does that involve? It always involves primarily a change in oneself. But of course, there is nothing wrong with us. How difficult it is to realize what the work teaches about this. Are we not all convinced that our views, our judgments, the way we take things and the ways we touch life are right? Yes, of course we are, and would justify that in an instant. To realize that you yourself must change is an awkward business, it ceases to be a joke. Yes, this work is serious because it requires an inner self-glance, not once, but twice, and not twice, but 1,000 times, to see what this acquired person called yourself is really like, to see that one is often a very narrow, biased, perhaps even unpleasant character. Here, however, we are all sure that we know that we are not unpleasant people. The aim of this work is to dissolve that really terrible self-complacency based upon pictures, attitudes and buffers acquired over a lifetime. The work is to break up this maddening pseudo-creation called yourself, this no doubt very proud and charming picture, deeply rooted to which we are a prisoner, a slave to this acquired machinery that we take as ourselves. Many moments of self-observation lead at length to whole photographs forming. This means that the practice of the work leads to catching real time-lapse images of what we are really like, and have been like over years and years. This can obviously be ego-shattering and an awkward business to begin to observe. However, it is dangerous unless we know how not to become identified, how not to be negative, otherwise it becomes a very awkward experience indeed, and we risk turning into bitter, angry, self-righteous individuals instead. This only happens though when we insist upon taking ourselves as one person and when we attribute everything we observe in ourselves to ourself, to something that we erroneously call I. The work teaches that this is imaginary I, laminated with acquired personality. Of course, if we take everything that we observe as I, then we shall find ourselves in great difficulty. However, as everyone knows, the work begins by teaching us earnestly that there are many I's within. So unless we can bear to realize this, we cannot do the work beyond a certain point. We cannot separate from ourselves, and if this is the case, then we cannot really grasp this work. Everything will remain personal, and we become indignant, even righteously offended. Suppose, for example, that one always identifies with the I's that are against this work. Then we would suffer in a manner that is quite useless. Have you ever really observed and got to know the negative I's that say all sorts of things and often blaspheme any work? Are you going to say I to them? All sorts and kinds of small ignorant I's that try to eat away at us all day long. Can we grasp what inner separation means? If not, then those small, negative, ignorant, narrow and stupid I's will deplete our workforce like a nest of beetles, mice and rats every day. It is a pity to give them the authority of I, of yourself, then to be dragged down from the moment we get up in the morning, to the time we collapse exhausted into bed each night. It is a tragedy to see a person in this work who really feels and wants to work, but is quite incapable of realizing different I's in themselves. It is a tragedy for a person not to understand what the work initially insists upon, that we are not one, but legion. If we cannot begin to see this, then all of our work will be in a mess. Each one of us has many eyes that are quite useless, even worse than useless. Everyone has eyes that hate to work because they know they will have to starve and eventually die, so they fight for their existence, it's survival instinct, and they will try to persuade you that they are really who you are. If you say "I" to them, then what can you really expect? On the other hand, if you can see them as eyes in you that you do not care particularly for, and deliberately decide through experience not to consent to, or believe in what they say, then you begin to enter the way of this work, even if they overpower you momentarily. There is a mantra in the work that emphasizes, "This is not I." Can we truly grasp what that means? It is interesting to notice how much vanity and pride enter at this point, so that a person insists they are fully conscious and know themselves, always acting consciously from a real I. Of course we don't, and it is foolish to imagine that we do. It is obviously more astute to notice that we don't. Thus begins work on oneself, and it is an extraordinary experience to undergo that loss of imaginary I. It means a loss of vanity but cannot begin, because it is not permitted to even start, unless our valuation of the work is strong enough to hold up during the loss and depersonalization which takes place when our acquired persona begins to be stripped away. The work can only help if we have caught hold of its teaching in one point of ourselves genuinely, through deep inner feeling and sense of aim, and then anchored it so that it can touch and then hold us when we have to begin to lose our grip on ego. Take individuals who regard themselves as solid, consistent folk. To such people the idea that they are not one person but many different people, often contradictory, will be something abhorrent. They will insist that they know themselves, that they are always one and the same steadfast, reliable soul, and regard that as firmness of character. And if any rather too transparent contradiction occurs, they will justify themselves immediately. Why? To keep that imaginary idea of themselves intact and inviolate. What a business it is to get a person to realize through this work the existence of many different eyes, and to actually feel their presence in themselves. How many times do we answer questions with, "I always think that"? The next question obviously becomes, well, which I thinks like that? We can all agree that it becomes rather baffling to receive a response like that. However, is it not a real reply? Is it not based upon the teaching of this work, which begins by telling us that we must realize we are not one but many eyes? An answer like that is the only real response possible. If, in the example provided, we answer the question by saying, "There is a certain I uppermost in me at this moment that appears to think like this," well then, the answer would be different. It would mean that we are not identified in the moment. But who of us yet can reach the step of seeing clearly that they have different eyes uppermost at different times? Who of us can see yet the turning round of different eyes in ourselves, and from that insight not identify with any one of them, not always taking them as I, as you, as yourself, as someone solid and permanent? Thinking, imagining we and others are always the same, does violence to us and to others. However, if we have got as far as not quite taking every psychic event, every viewpoint, every thought, state and feeling as I, as me, then we begin to understand what this work says about inner separation and selection. Some eyes are our friends, other eyes are our enemies. Some eyes give us force, other eyes rob us of force, and some actually eat us alive, feeding off our life force like internal parasites. How then can a person in the work live in a self-complacent sleep saying, "I" to everything in themselves? Is not all development through a process of rejection and selection? How can we either reject or select if all is one and the same to us, if all is quite simply labeled I? If you keep a garden, do you not throw out weeds, then cultivate, nourish and tend to those useful plants? It is not impossible to do this in your inner life if you take everything as you. We all struggle with bad thoughts or bad feelings, which if we take them as I, as mine, then all we're doing is strengthening and validating them. Suppose we begin to understand this teaching of many eyes, of non-identifying with ourselves. Then find that we are identifying with the negative thoughts and feelings coming from those eyes, regarding them as me, myself thinking and feeling, then where would that lead to? Perhaps one should think, yes, but these bad thoughts and feelings are inside me, so what can be done about that? Indeed, what can we do? We can agree with them, consent to them, identify with them and give them the authority of I. But supposing on the other hand that we dispute their actions, defy them and disown them, quite simply refusing to say I to them, but it instead. Would this make them stronger or weaker? Do you think that all the people you see walking on the pavement are you? The object of this work is to make us conscious within ourselves and to ourselves, to what is going on inside of us, to the vast inner traffic of thoughts and feelings that lie within, in the psychic invisible realm, as distinct from the vast outer physical world of things and people that our senses reveal to us. Here, in that inner world, containing what we select and reject as influences, lies the key to this work and so to evolution. We all know obviously how to reject and select things in the outer world. We discard useless things from our daily business and cling to useful things. This is the exact same concept. Suppose through long observation, that you notice that certain eyes create moods, thoughts and feelings which depress you, consume all of your energy, that make you despondent or negative, suspicious, evil-minded and paranoid. Then what are you going to do about that? Are you going to give such moods, such states your full endorsement and approval? Are you going to continue to regard them as you? Why should you? If it is pouring with rain, do you remain standing there in the rain or separate from it? Are you going to practice non-identifying with these bad inner states, not going with them, not listening to them? Because if you cannot see that you are legion, and insist upon regarding yourself as one, then you can do nothing with regard to your inner life and are victim to it instead. So what is this work about? It is to open us to new and better influences coming down from the ray of creation. What is life? It is a machine under certain influences that nourish the moon. You can see it at work, notice it, reflect upon what it is like. It is not some exceptional state of things that prevails only today, it is the ordinary state of things, of life, and it has always been so. However, the side octave from the sun comes down to us carrying the possibility of new influences. In that brief spiritual period of ancient Egypt, under Amenhotep, the sun was represented by long rays ending in hands. It did not mean the literal, visible sun, of course, but a higher level of understanding and life, such as that belonging to conscious humanity, not to this violent, greedy, slumbering and chaotic humanity covering the surface of the earth, used almost entirely for cosmic purposes. If we have grown familiar with esoteric teaching, with this work, then we can understand why Amenhotep represented the sun with hands at the end of its rays, reaching toward the earth. But they were never shown, however, as quite reaching the earth. Recall the allegory of the rope that the work speaks of, that which it is necessary to jump toward in order to catch hold of it. If we estimate the work by our practical business eyes, our ordinary pleasure and worldly eyes, then we will not be able to realize that we are not one but many. It requires a trace of magnetic center. It requires a little emotional understanding and depth of feeling, not merely formatory proof. How can it be proven that a strawberry tastes different from an apple? Not through any formatory argument. We must taste and see for ourselves. How can it be proven to you that to begin to feel the many influences of this work is different from being immersed in subjective life? Not through any formatory argument, that much is obvious. Nor can it be proven to us that this work is true. For if you are wholly immersed in life, then best not to even attempt it. In fact, this work will not seek to touch us, such as we are, simply in life and enthralled by its horizons. If that is all that satisfies us, then why attempt a new interpretation, a new meaning for existence on this imperfect and violent planet? The work is for those who feel some sort of conviction that life cannot be understood in terms of itself. If you are satisfied with all of your experiences, if you feel life is all that you need, if you are thoroughly satiated with yourself, if you are content with everything as yet experienced, then why seek what any work has to offer? If not, then we must be intelligent enough to connect our disillusionment with this work. We must begin to be able to realize that our many discontents are not exceptional, then catch a glimpse of what the work says about life. How absolutely everything just happens, how our being attracts what happens to us and so on. Otherwise, how can this work help us? It is far too easy to become negative, then blame others or circumstances. This occurs on all sides of our lives and is the usual opera. However, magnetic center makes a person feel there must be something else. They have an idea there is another drama unfolding, not all comprised of negative emotion and tragedy. The problem is an inner one. Its solution begins with self-observation, according to some definite instructions. So unless we can observe ourselves, this work remains dead. In order to observe yourself, it is necessary to realize that you are not one but many. Unless you can eventually see different eyes in yourself, you cannot reject or select from among them. Without this work and the understanding of what it means, we will not be able, eventually, to reject and select with discernment. Which, if it's practiced, then new influences begin to enter our inner life. We have to want them, however, if we are to begin to feel the beginning of some new life, and accept the presence of grace. If we listen to it, then something begins to grow inside of us. If we know when we are out of touch with it and feel a certain deprivation, a kind of deficit, then seek it out, it will return once more. For a long time and inevitably, we tend to swing, however, between the old and the new. It is a question of inner valuation, of that strange thing called will, which is like turning without violence in one direction, in spite of setbacks, like the magnetic needle of a compass. All of this, all the beginning of this octave discussed earlier, that create new energies, all this remains almost impossible if we say I to everything in ourselves. Then we remain in total darkness, as in the opening verses of Genesis, where it notes that light is not yet divided from darkness. Notice eyes that eat at your life force. We often experience plagues of them, and for a time do not notice. We take these thoughts and words and feelings as I, because we are asleep. We are, each of us, enveloped within by negative, weak, carping, poor, suspicious, narrow and stupid eyes. Some of them have gained great strength through long habitual consent to them. We've emboldened them and acquiesced to their decisions in most things. Observe a person, notice how suddenly they lose force, become weakened, negative, lost and disillusioned. What has happened? Some I is eating at that individual. Our inner life is far more dangerous than our outer life with all of its pitfalls. We must realize that this doctrine of eyes does not relieve us of any responsibility. Only a fool can imagine that. To reject eyes or to select eyes is a very real thing. To go with wrong eyes can give us real pain, real suffering, and bewilderment. This is useful suffering, however, and we must learn to hate eyes in ourselves that do that to us. Otherwise we make the work trivial, an excuse for doing just what we want. There are periods when this work comes down very hard on us. Then it passes for a time. But if it never comes down hard on us, then rest assured it is not yet willing to touch us. A vision dreamt showed someone their uncles and aunts, mother, father, sisters, brothers, friends, peers and colleagues all standing around them in a hospital room. The incumbent was lying in bed, dying and almost deceased. All of those gathered were in deep black. It was at that moment that a teacher was observed, entering the room, looking emaciated, pale and very sickly. The teacher quickly turned around and left in a hurry without looking directly at the bed. Here is an emotional parable of this person's inner state. All of their acquired life eyes surround them, and they are dying. The work enters, but in a very poor state, and then turns around and leaves hurriedly. Perhaps this illustrates why this person died as far as the work was concerned. They had in themselves no free power of choice. In a way they saw the work and acknowledged it, but their eyes were too strong. Remember, the work is exactly as strong in us as we allow it to be. It is a question of valuation and we have to want it.